So, before we get into the hearing itself, let's just lay out the resume nobody's really disputing here. This guy spent years as Donald Trump's personal criminal defense lawyer. Sat next to him at the hush money trial, the one that ended in 34 felony convictions. Collected, close to $10 million for that work. Then Trump wins re-election, makes him deputy attorney general. And when Pam Bondi gets fired back in early April, he doesn't get replaced, he gets promoted into the job on an acting basis. So now the Senate's deciding whether acting becomes permanent. That's the backdrop. Okay, now here's the actual hearing clip. Just listen to how this goes.
In thanking the men and women of the Department of Justice for their service, I want to begin where maybe we have some common ground. You would agree that the Islamic Republic of Iran is well known to detain, torture, even kill political dissidents, including evangelical Christians, would you not?
Yes, Senator, they have done that, yes.
And last week, the Iranian American Legal Defense Fund filed a lawsuit alleging that the Trump administration has adopted a policy of collaborating with the Islamic Republic of Iran to provide details about asylum applicants. This is the United States government providing information regularly and frequently to the Iranian government about Iranian nationals who are seeking asylum here in the United States. These are declarations made under oath before the court about high officials stationed here with Iran getting information from the United States government, and then the American government deporting hundreds of individuals, including evangelical Christians, back to Iran, where they face torture, imprisonment, potential death. Were you or the Department of Justice consulted about this policy?
Well, that's not our policy, Senator. We would never send somebody home to be tortured. That's not what the American people would expect of us. That's certainly not what President Trump does. So I'm not familiar with the lawsuit you're talking about, but there's no such policy.
Will you commit to investigate these allegations?
I haven't know nothing about the lawsuit. I will. When you say commit to investigate allegations, we don't do that. But certainly, if the lawsuit needs to be answered and part of that includes investigation, absolutely.
Well, you do investigate allegations of illegality. This policy would clearly be not only illegal, but
no such
morally
policy.
repugnant, would it not? You agreed with me that it should not be the policy of the United States to do it.
But in your question, you're suggesting there is such a policy. I'm telling you there is no such policy.
Well, if there is no such policy, then I presume you would investigate it.
When I see the lawsuit, I'm just not familiar with it. We will, of course, do what's appropriate.
But you'd agree with me that it would be wrong.
That it would be wrong, meaning it would be wrong to send somebody home to be tortured, yes.
Let me ask you about allegations in connection with David Gentili. I think we talked about these allegations when you visited me. Thank you for coming to my office. In May of 2025, David Gentili was sentenced to 7 years in prison for his role in an almost $1.8 billion Ponzi-like scheme that defrauded over 10,000 investors, many of them middle-class retirees, of their hard-earned savings, and he was imprisoned. He boasted to fellow inmates and others that he was going to be released because he paid $2.5 million for clemency. Evidence collected by the Eastern District of New York supported those allegations and reportedly also included statements by Father Frank Mann that he spoke to the president about David Gentili. The Eastern District of New York was investigating these allegations and reportedly received a call from one of your top deputies instructing them about the concerns of the Department of Justice. the investigation was stopped by the Eastern District of New York. I wrote to you on June 23rd and United States Attorney Joseph Nacella about these allegations that an investigation into this impropriety was shut down at the request of your office. Did you have any involvement or knowledge about the commutation of Mr. Gentili's sentence?
President Trump, as I've said a couple times today, has full authority to pardon or commute anybody convicted of federal crime.
That's not my question.
So I'm answering your question, Senator.
Did you
I'm answering
know
your
about
question. What my communications with President Trump, I will not talk about. He does not, nor should he. He has no obligation to discuss pardon or commutation decisions with me, and he has not. As far as the what you just suggested about an investigation, I believe you're referring to a news article that was the result of apparent leaks, and I would caution that there's falsehoods in those news articles.
I'm asking you whether you had any involvement in commuting that sentence or in stopping the investigation into the allegations of impropriety, possibly payment to Father Frank Mann.
And I answered the first question, but when you say stopping an investigation, there's an assumption built into your question that I will not concede. We will not talk about whether investigations exist or don't exist, and certainly some leak about something that we supposedly did doesn't warrant an answer either.
There was an investigation, correct?
That's my whole point in saying is that there's an assumption baked into your question that I don't think is true, meaning that we cannot comment on even the existence of investigations
You've
like that.
commented this morning to Republican colleagues about several investigations.
No, I haven't.
Well, you commented in response to the chairman about the FISA investigation.
About the what? Excuse me?
The investigation that he asked you about.
So, Senator, my point is that you're asking me questions about a news article, the source of which was apparently leaks. It would be inappropriate for me as the acting attorney general to comment on such leaks or news articles that you're referencing. But
I accept that you're not going to answer my question, but I think there is a need for the Inspector General to look into the investigation that was apparently, according to these articles and other information, stopped as a result of your intervention. Let me move on. In 2017, more than 10,000 9/11 victims filed suit against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That lawsuit is heading to trial. Information was promised by President Trump in September of 2019. That information has not been provided. Will you commit to meet with those families and provide the information they need for their lawsuit?
Folks from my office have met with the representatives of those families. We will commit to continuing to have communications, of course.
And provide the information they're seeking?
Well, you're saying, I don't know what the information is you're talking about, so obviously I can't just commit to providing the information.
Well, let's talk about other information. Information about the Epstein abuses. Your predecessor apologized to the Epstein survivors, with good reason, because as you've said today, mistakes were made. I'm asking you today, with Epstein survivors in this room, to apologize to them.
Well, so my heart breaks for every victim of any sexual crime, whether it's involving Mr. Epstein or somebody else. And so if you're asking me to apologize that this happened to them, of course, absolutely. This is a horrible thing, which is why this Department of Justice, this administration is focused very heavily on going after these predators. And so, yes, of course, that's part of my job as being empathetic to the victims of crime.
Will you apologize to them for the mishandling and mistakes that were made by the United States Department of Justice?
I will absolutely say that any mistake that we made should not have been made. And I very much apologize. I can answer the question, or you can just interrupt me, Senator, but I am answering your question. I very much, and I have said this to anybody that asks and publicly before, any mistake that was made is not appropriate. And so, yes, I am sorry that in about 1% of the documents, mistakes were made. But what I will say on top of that is we put tons of resources to rectifying those mistakes immediately, including pulling down documents within minutes of being informed that there were mistakes, potential mistakes made, and working 24/7 to rectify any mistakes. And that's what I would expect the victims would want us to do, and their counsel and this body as well.
And you would agree with me, wouldn't you, that you can well meet with any of the survivors or victims with their counsel present? You said you can't meet with them, but you could meet with them if they're
I never said I can't meet with them. I said if they were represented, I had to meet through counsel. But of course, I can meet with them. I'm the acting Attorney General of the United States, so yes, I can. I very strongly believe that for these victims to tell their stories and the evidence that they have, they should meet, like any victim of a crime, with the FBI or a law enforcement agent, and that we will do everything we can to prosecute if we can.
The judge in Florida referred your misconduct. She concluded that there was misconduct and misrepresentation and improper purpose in that legal action to the Bar of New York for potential discipline, including losing your law license. I know you disagree with the result of the ruling. Has that kind of referral ever happened by a federal judge for an Attorney General of the United States?
Can you?
I don't know, but I'll tell you something. That judge never asked us to respond. She never gave us an opportunity to respond to anything, and she didn't refer me. She just asked that a copy of the order be provided to the New York Bar, because there are several activist groups that have filed complaints against me. So listen, as I've said earlier, I think anybody on this committee, especially the lawyers that have practiced, can read that opinion and reach their own conclusions. But I very much disagree with the judge's insinuations about me, and we're going to do what we can to make that right.
One last question. Would you agree with me that agents of the United States should not fire into cars unless fire their weapons into cars unless there is an imminent threat?
Give a short answer to that.
There's a well-established standard as to when an agent can discharge their firearm, and I think that's something that should be followed in every case.
And that includes not firing weapons into cars.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, so let's actually dig into what's behind that Iran exchange, because there's a lot more to it than what fit into a few minutes of questioning. 8 days before the hearing, the Iranian American Legal Defense Fund filed a federal lawsuit in Washington, and the claim, backed by sworn declarations, is that since roughly March 2025, U.S. officials have been meeting monthly with Iranian government reps through Pakistan's embassy, since, Washington and Tehran don't have a direct channel, and handing over case files on detained Iranian asylum seekers. And here's the part that should really stop you. What allegedly went into those files wasn't just names, it was the actual reasons people gave for fleeing. Converting away from Islam, sexual orientation, involvement in the 2022 Woman Life Freedom protests. The filing goes further, claiming detained Iranians were brought into rooms with Iranian officials who already seemed to know exactly what they told U.S. immigration officers. 3 deportation flights to Iran are already on record: September 2025, December 2025, and January 2026, the last one just weeks before the U.S.-Iran war started. An Iranian-born pastor who tracks these cases estimated the September flight alone carried around 15 Christian converts, plus elderly deportees and women. And under Iranian law, leaving Islam counts as apostasy, a charge that can carry a death sentence. Separately, one nonprofit tracking asylum data found Iranian approval rates fell from 86% in early 2024 to under half by this year. So when he told the senator flatly no such policy, not familiar with the lawsuit, that's the context that was sitting behind that denial. Now, the Gentile thing. David Gentile ran what prosecutors called a Ponzi-style operation. Something like $1.8 billion over 10,000 investors, a lot of them retirees who lost their savings. Convicted in August 2024 after an 8-week trial, sentenced the following May to 7 years, reported to prison November 14, 2025. 12 days later, the president commuted his sentence. 12 days. Around that same window, Brooklyn federal prosecutors opened an investigation into how that happened after the New York Times reported that Gentile, riding from prison, had discussed paying $2.5 million or more to get himself out. One name that came up, a retired priest who gave the invocation at the 2025 inauguration and who allegedly lobbied on Gentile's behalf, something he's denied. By this past May, that Brooklyn investigation had basically gone quiet. No charges, no grand jury, no public explanation for why it stopped. And there's a financial casualty in here, too, that doesn't get talked about enough. The commutation didn't just erase the prison time, it also wiped out Gentile's $15.5 million restitution obligation to the people he defrauded. So when the questioning turned to whether a phone call from a top deputy had halted that Brooklyn probe, notice what happened. A refusal to even confirm or deny an investigation existed right after, minutes earlier, freely discussing other investigations with Republican colleagues in the same room. No charges, no grand jury, no public explanation for why it stopped. On the Epstein files, there was an apology of sorts, regret over mistakes, a pledge that resources went into fixing them, but attorneys representing close to 100 survivors gave ABC News a pretty different accounting. Names and identifying details scattered throughout the January 2026 release, some never publicly connected to the case before, some accompanied by nude images, and a pattern the lawyers flagged directly. Men associated with Epstein had their names redacted. The women who survived him mostly didn't. So about 1%, that's how it got framed. To the survivors' lawyers, that 1% is thousands of individual privacy failures, each one a real name, a real photo, released without consent. 2 days, 48 hours before this hearing even opened, U.S. District Judge Kathleen Williams issued a 56-page order tearing apart a settlement the Justice Department reached with the president over his IRS lawsuit. That settlement created a fund worth $1.776 billion. The number's not an accident, it's a nod to 1776, meant, in the administration's telling, to compensate people who said the Biden-era IRS unfairly targeted them. Williams' finding was blunt. The government and the president were never really on opposing sides in that case, which is kind of the whole point of a settlement, and the arrangement looked like a political payout dressed up as a legal judgment. She noted the eligible categories included people connected to January 6th prosecutions and to the president's own classified documents case, and she sent her findings over to the New York bar, where a disciplinary review was already underway. Because buried in that settlement was something even more specific, a memo, personally signed, declaring the federal government permanently barred from ever pursuing tax action against the president or his businesses. No court order behind it, no congressional sign-off. Williams found it violated a federal statute that bars exactly this kind of interference in tax matters. At the hearing, the fund got called dead. The signature on the memo that created the immunity didn't get walked back. So since that hearing, something pretty unusual happened. 101 former federal and state judges signed a joint complaint asking the New York bar to look into his fitness to hold a law license. And judges don't do that lightly. Their whole profession runs on the public believing the law applies the same to everyone. Their complaint put the argument plainly. The country needs an attorney general who answers to the nation, not to one man. 2 Republican senators on the Judiciary Committee left that hearing still publicly undecided. One no from either of them sinks this nomination before it even reaches the full Senate floor. A vote's expected before the month's out. So, what they do with all of this, the asylum files, the commutation, the redactions, the memo, the 101 judges, that's going to answer a lot more than whether one guy gets a promotion. It's going to answer who this Justice Department actually works for.